Before we begin, I just want to remind you that Somewhere Sinister is back up and running. We're getting through Season 4 and already starting to work on Season 5, so if you like this show, you'll probably like that one, so check it out. A link is in the description. On July 15, 1997, internationally known fashion designer Gianni Versace walked out of his property in South Beach and bought some magazines at a local newsstand. As he was just about to unlock the gate to his property, he was shot in the head twice and dropped to the ground dead. Despite a quick response and an extensive manhunt, the shooter was gone, but it would soon be realized that the world-renowned designer was only the latest in a string of cross-country murders committed by the same person. This is Monsters. Andrew Cunanan was born on August 31, 1969 in National City, just south of San Diego, California, to Modesto and Marianne Cunanan. Modesto was born in the Philippines and had become an officer in the United States Navy. After he retired from the service, he became a stockbroker and provided well for the family. Marianne was a devout Catholic and frequently brought Andrew along with his 3 other siblings to Mass. His father was a strict disciplinarian, and Andrew complained to friends at school that Modesto beat him so hard he left bruises on his back and stomach. It would be something that would affect Andrew for the rest of his life. In school, Andrew was said to have above-average intelligence. He was known to read an encyclopedia at bedtime when he was only 10 years old. People say as the baby of the family, he was overprotected by his mother and spoiled by both parents. Because of Andrew's intelligence, the Cunanans sent him to the Bishop Private School in San Diego. His teachers said he never forgot anyone's names and had almost photographic memory. He learned at school that he could get almost anything he wanted due to his good looks and charm. In his teens, Andrew began his obsession with clothing and fashion. He was always buying new outfits and changing his hairstyle. Kids at school bullied him, questioning his sexual orientation, but Andrew quickly took ownership of his sexuality and was open about it at a pretty young age. He became sexually active when he was 14 years old, and he started a relationship with an older man who is said to have been married with children. That man would take Andrew out and pay for meals and give him gifts, and it was something the teen would immediately become addicted to. His siblings were grown and doing their own thing, and his parents were too preoccupied with themselves by that point to notice his late-night absences. So Andrew started doing whatever he could to live a life where he got whatever he wanted. He was tall and fit and looked older than he was, so he would go to gay clubs in the city and tell people his name was Andrew Da Silva or David Morales. Sometimes he would tell people he was Drew Phillips, a trainee art dealer. By the time Andrew was 16, the relationship with the older man was over, and his mother, not knowing her son was gay, started making an effort to get her baby boy back under her wing. For his sweet 16, she convinced Modesto to buy him a red Nissan 300ZX. Instead of pulling her son back towards her, the gift had the opposite effect. Andrew felt insulted that his family thought they could buy his love. At school, Andrew somehow turned to the attitudes of the students who once bullied him by being even more flamboyant and eccentric. They started seeing him as more of a court jester than the gay kid, and people who knew him said that he eventually became tolerated by everyone. When Andrew graduated from high school, his yearbook quote said, "Après moi le déluge," which literally translates to "after me the flood," and commonly gets translated to "after me disaster." Nobody could have imagined how accurate that quote would be. In 1987, Andrew enrolled at the University of San Diego, where he studied history. That might have been a method of learning about the world so he could keep up conversation with older, wealthier dates. He quickly became a popular date for successful older men, and he began reaping the benefits. One even gave him a $30,000 car. During that time, it's believed that Andrew's parents discovered their son was gay but didn't bring it up to him. They silently accepted it, and the parents, at least at the time, never spoke to Andrew about it. In October of 1988, Modesto was fired from his job as a stockbroker, and he suggested they sell the house and move to the Philippines. Marianne had no interest in leaving California, but Modesto had already made up his mind. What he hadn't told his family was that he was actually fired for misappropriating $106,000 from the company. He was likely going to be investigated for embezzlement, so he had a strong desire to flee the country. They put the house up for sale, and once they found a buyer, Modesto left, but promised his wife there would be enough left from the sale for her to buy a smaller house. Once the deal was done, she was left with $3,000. Modesto had essentially abandoned his family and left them with almost nothing. Right after Modesto left, Marianne finally confronted her son about his sexual orientation and told Andrew that she was ashamed of him. He lashed out and slammed her up against the house in the backyard, dislocating her shoulder. The attack happened right in front of their neighbor. Modesto had suggested that Andrew go with him to the Philippines, so Andrew decided it was a better option than staying with his mother. Andrew dropped out of university and flew to Manila, but was unprepared for what he saw. His father was living in a shack in one of the worst slums outside of the city. Modesto was selling used junk on the street corner and was excited Andrew could start working with him. It was not the life Andrew thought it would be. He immediately wanted to go back to the US and had to come up with a plan to make enough money for a ticket. Andrew started going to the red light district looking to pick up where he had left off in San Diego, but the scene was completely different. While there, he met some sex workers that encouraged him to dress as a woman to attract more customers. When he did, he started seeing some clients regularly, and after 3 months was able to purchase a one-way ticket back to California. His father seemed indifferent to Andrew's plans, and he had no interest in patching things up with his mother. So Andrew returned to the west coast of the US and started living in San Francisco. The Castro district in San Francisco was the capital of the gay scene in the city, maybe even the state. Andrew was ready to start over fresh and find himself a new man to provide the lifestyle he felt he deserved. But the scene was tight-knit and he struggled to break the ice. Even though he had multiple contacts from men he'd met in San Diego who had traveled down from San Francisco, he was not accepted as quickly as he had hoped. After getting a job working in a kitchen, Andrew would spend his nights off impressing men at local bars as a number of different characters. The one who owned thousands of acres of land in the French Riviera, the aspiring actor, the heir to a sugar plantation, the owner of a construction company. Gianni Versace was an Italian fashion designer known for founding the Versace brand. His company produces clothing, accessories, makeup, fragrances, and home furnishings. Gianni also designed costumes for the opera and in 1990 had done just that for the San Francisco opera production of Capriccio. By then, Andrew had finally met the sugar daddy he so wanted and was living at the home of an actor who was not out at the time. He was supposed to be the man's assistant, and the two were at a nightclub after the opera when Gianni showed up. Andrew would go on to tell people that the fashion designer recognized him from a previous party they had both attended, but most don't believe that was true. Through the early 90s, Andrew and his partner became increasingly involved in the BDSM scene. Andrew starred in 2 low-budget BDSM movies, but wasn't paid for the work. He did it as a favor to his partner. Soon, Andrew moved in with a new, even richer sugar daddy, but he eventually got bored and decided to move back to San Diego. Once there, he fell right back into the local scene and found a new rich man to support his lifestyle. One thing that Andrew did that surprised everyone around him was move back in with his mother. The two shared an apartment in downtown San Diego, each paying half the rent. Marianne returned to living in denial of her son's sexuality, and she continually asked him to go to mass with her, something he did on occasion, which people said was just to make her happy. The next thing that Andrew did that shocked his friends was claim that he had an ex-wife and a child. One day at a local bar, Andrew pulled a worn photo out of his pocket. When the other patrons saw the picture of the woman and baby, Andrew said that they were his ex-wife and child. He would go on to say that he had secretly met and married a Spanish woman in 1994 so that she could get a green card. He was paid $1,000 for his service as a surrogate husband. According to Andrew, the couple said their vows, went out for a drink, and then parted ways. But then he bumped into her a few months later and said he found himself attracted to her. They ended up sleeping together and she got pregnant. He said that he had tried to support the woman and their future child by getting a job at a drugstore, but he hated it and quit, returning to his life of living off of wealthy older men. Not many people believed that the story was true, and they were right. Andrew had never been married and didn't have a child. He was showing them a picture of a friend with her child. In 1995, Andrew's current financier broke up with him for spending too much of his own money on other men. Andrew maxed out the credit card he had been given and said he would only return things if the man bought him a Mercedes. Jeff Trail had wanted to be a fighter pilot since he was young. Growing up in rural Illinois, he had taken flying lessons in high school and had an after-school job at the local airport. Once he graduated from high school, he joined the Navy and unfortunately didn't make good enough grades to achieve his dream. Still, he liked the discipline of the military, and after graduating from the Naval Academy, Jeff was stationed in San Diego, where he met Andrew Cunanan. They got along well, and their relationship was the opposite of Andrew's other relationships. Andrew paid for them to go out. Andrew would eventually start telling people that Jeff was his best friend. As Jeff became more comfortable with his sexuality, he realized that the military wasn't the best place for him, and he began making plans to change careers when his contract with the service was up. One of his options was becoming a police officer, so during that time Jeff purchased a Taurus .40 caliber PT-100 handgun. Jeff had qualified as an expert with both the pistol and rifle in the Navy, and he continued to go to the range with his new weapon. Sometimes Andrew would come along. In 1995, Jeff took the California Civil Service exam, and soon after, he left the Navy and headed to Sacramento to start training for the California Highway Patrol. At some point during his training, Jeff dropped out of the program and moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota, where he began working as a district manager for a propane retailer. By that time, Andrew had been supporting himself by selling drugs and had asked Jeff to help him on multiple occasions. Jeff may have decided to leave California to put some distance between them. Around that time, Andrew was in San Francisco visiting old friends when he saw a man sitting alone at the bar. His name was David Madson, and he was an architect coincidentally from Minneapolis. David worked for a large firm that designed buildings for banks all over the country. David was also the youngest of 4 siblings, but he wasn't spoiled in any way. He did well in school and got a degree in architecture from the University of Minneapolis, where he was awarded the President's Medal for the most outstanding thesis for the class of 1995. David deeply cared about other people, taking groceries to the needy and working as a ski and swimming instructor. When Andrew and David first started talking, sparks flew. They had a long-distance relationship for a while, but David started withdrawing from the relationship due to Andrew's habit of disappearing for days at a time. David knew that Andrew was involved in shady business, which he believed was drugs. With Andrew's last sugar daddy kicking him out and Jeff and David distancing themselves, Andrew was on a downward spiral. For the first time in years, Andrew didn't have someone paying all of his bills, and he was forced to sell his car because he needed the money. He was also taking more and more drugs, especially meth and cocaine. His credit cards were maxed out to the tune of over $40,000, and he was staying in a seedy motel. He was able to talk his creditors into giving him an extension so he could purchase a plane ticket to Minneapolis. Andrew told friends that he was going to move back to San Francisco, but that first he needed to go to Minneapolis to take care of some business. Andrew arrived in Minneapolis on April 25, 1997. David picked him up from the airport, and they went out to dinner and to a nightclub before they both stayed at David's apartment. The following day, they went out to dinner again, and Andrew went to Jeff's apartment to stay the night. Jeff and his new boyfriend were out of town for the evening. When they arrived back the next day, Andrew had already left. A friend talked to David on Sunday, and they made plans to meet up later that day, but he never showed up and she was unable to reach him. The exact events leading to his and Jeff's deaths are unclear, but it's believed that Andrew had a heated argument with Jeff at his apartment and stole his gun before leaving. Later that day, Jeff and Andrew were supposed to meet at a coffee shop near David's apartment, but call records show that someone called David's apartment from the coffee shop and then from the apartment's entrance shortly after, so it looked like Jeff went to David's apartment. Once inside, Andrew struck him 27 times with the blunt and claw end of a hammer. His watch had been damaged in the attack and had stopped at 10:55 p.m. It's believed that David was present for the murder and was with Andrew in his apartment for the next few days. It's unclear why. Police initially believed that he was involved with the murder, but his family said that wasn't possible and he was likely being held hostage. Neighbors did see them in the elevator the next day and out walking David's dog. It's possible that Andrew threatened to tell authorities that he helped with the murder if he left. Again, it's unknown, but they left David's apartment in his red Jeep and headed north. On April 29th, one of David's coworkers was concerned that he hadn't shown up for a few days, so he stopped by his apartment, but didn't get an answer at the door. David had missed an important meeting that morning, so the coworker called the police, and upon entry into the apartment, they found Jeff's body. It had been rolled up into a rug and hidden behind the sofa. The authorities didn't know it was Jeff. At first, they thought it was David, but when the description didn't match, they thought it could be Andrew. They still weren't sure of the victim's identity by the time of the autopsy. It wasn't until the medical examiner unrolled the body from the rug that he found a wallet and ID in the victim's pocket. On May 2nd, David and Andrew were seen north of Minneapolis at a bar together eating lunch. The following morning, David's body was found on the shore of Rush Lake, about an hour north of Minneapolis. He had been shot 3 times with the gun Andrew had stolen from Jeff. Once in the back of the head, exiting out of his right eye, once in the cheek, and once in the back. Andrew had left the area in David's vehicle. The lead investigator on Jeff's murder saw the news about a body found in the neighboring county to the north, and the cases were connected. Lee and Marilyn Miglin lived in Chicago, Illinois. Lee was a successful real estate developer, and Marilyn was known on the home shopping network where she sold her own line of cosmetics and fragrances. They had been married 37 years and had 2 grown children. On May 3rd, Marilyn had left on a business trip and Lee stayed behind, conducting his usual business. He was supposed to pick his wife up from the airport the next day, but never arrived. Marilyn eventually took a taxi home, and when she arrived, Lee was nowhere to be found. Then she saw a gun laying on the counter in the upstairs bathroom, so she called the police. While she was waiting for them to arrive, she ran to the neighbor's house and asked for their help. Stephen Byer went into the large townhouse to search for clues. First, he saw a half-empty melted pint of ice cream and an empty Coke can on the kitchen counter, which was unusual for a man as fastidious as Lee. He went upstairs and saw the gun in the bathroom. Then he went into a guest bedroom where he saw a closet of clothes had been rummaged through. In the garage, Lee's green Lexus was missing. Lee had a car phone in the Lexus, but the calls weren't going through. When police searched the house, they noted all the same things that were out of place that Stephen had. Then they went into the garage where Lee's 2 other vehicles were still parked. It was then that someone finally noticed a body under the Jeep with a garbage can in front of it to partially hide it from view. Lee's hands and feet were bound with an extension cord, his face had been wrapped in duct tape, and he had been stabbed almost 30 times with a screwdriver. Then his throat was cut with a pruning saw. One odd detail was that Lee had been stabbed, but there were no penetrations in his button-up shirt or the white undershirt, so either he was redressed after being killed or the attacker had lifted his shirt up to stab him. The investigation started with pure confusion. Who would want to kill Lee and why do it in such a horrendous manner? Lee's secretary told investigators that she had recently delivered $2,000 in cash to her boss and that it was gone now. They found dark beard hairs in the bathroom that didn't belong to Lee. Someone had shaved, stolen some clothes, and fled in Lee's Lexus after his murder. But there would be no suspects for days following the discovery. It was 3 days later that an officer noticed 3 parking tickets on a red Jeep Grand Cherokee just down the street from the Miglin's townhouse. When they ran the plates, the vehicle had been reported stolen, and murder suspect Andrew Cunanan had been driving it. Now, with confirmation that Andrew had left the state of Minnesota, the FBI could come in and start a national manhunt. Andrew's connection to Lee Miglin wasn't clear. It seemed that Andrew had met the Miglin's son, Duke, in California years prior, but other than that, no solid connection was ever found. Andrew headed straight to New York, where he went to the West Side Club, a gay men's bathhouse. It's believed that Andrew went to the movies while in New York, but his activities aren't well known. He left New York, and by May 9th he was in New Jersey. The police were trying to track the car Andrew was driving using the car phone. The phone needed a PIN number to be able to make calls, but it was still active and would still send out a signal from time to time. Someone ended up reporting that on the news, and Andrew heard, so he became desperate for a new vehicle. William Reese, who went by Bill, had been the caretaker for Finn's National Cemetery in Pennsville Township, New Jersey for 22 years. It's believed that Andrew saw Bill pick up the mail for the cemetery out on the road in his 1995 Chevy pickup truck and head back down to the caretaker's office. Andrew followed him to the cemetery, snuck up behind him, and shot him in the back of the head. He used the same gun that he had stolen from Jeff. The gun found in the bathroom of the Miglin's townhouse turned out to be a non-working replica of a Beretta that belonged to Duke. After killing Bill, he took off in the truck. Hours later, Bill's wife Rebecca grew concerned that her husband hadn't returned home from work. She drove out to the cemetery where she found the front gate open and the door to the caretaker's office ajar. She called the police, who arrived and found Bill's body in the basement of the building. Inside Lee Miglin's Lexus, they found a bloody screwdriver, a couple of photographs of Andrew's friends, and a number of bloody gloves. Investigators searched everywhere for the red pickup truck, but Andrew was headed south and he wouldn't stop until he got to Florida. Andrew checked into the Normandy Plaza Hotel in Miami Beach on May 12th. He paid $29 per night in cash and gave the manager a fake ID. He had stopped at a Walmart parking lot and stole a license plate to put on the truck. Andrew actually parked the truck right in front of the hotel for the first 2 weeks he was there. He eventually moved it to a municipal parking garage only a few blocks away from Gianni Versace's house. For the next month and a half, Andrew did what he could to make money. He sold himself, pawned stolen goods, and it's believed that he stole a wallet. On June 12, 1997, Andrew Cunanan was put on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. He was featured on the popular show America's Most Wanted, and the news of his murder spree was all over the television and radio everywhere in the country. Andrew continued to lay low, getting by on the little money he could make along with the money he had on him when he arrived in Miami Beach. Money that was quickly drying up. It's unclear what Andrew's long-term plan was, if he even had one, but he didn't have long before he was going to run out of money. Gianni Versace didn't live in his South Beach mansion full-time, but he had traveled to the U.S. in preparation of opening his business to the stock market in the U.S. He was in New York for a few days before traveling to his house in Florida. By mid-July, Andrew had run out of money and he left the hotel on the 14th, not paying his final bill. On the morning of the 15th, Gianni got up early and walked down the street to purchase 5 magazines from a newsstand. As he was about to unlock the front gate to his property, Andrew walked up behind him and shot him in the back of the head. The bullet entered just behind his left ear, hit the back of his brain, and exited out the front of his neck. The bullet hit one of the gate rails, broke apart, and a piece of the shrapnel hit a nearby dove in the head, killing it. As Gianni slightly turned after being shot the first time, he was shot again in the cheek, and that bullet lodged itself in his brain. The fashion designer fell to the ground, and though he was kept alive through CPR after the paramedics arrived, it was determined that he was likely immediately brain dead. A neighbor watched the entire attack in shock. Another neighbor was walking by and began chasing Andrew. When Andrew turned and pointed the gun at the man, he stopped his pursuit. The cook inside Gianni's home called 911, and a nearby city worker radioed for authorities to be notified about the shooting. Gianni was rushed to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. Despite there being a number of officers in the area pretty quickly, Andrew was gone. During the search, authorities did find the stolen Chevy truck in the parking garage, and inside were a number of Andrew's belongings. It was confirmed that Andrew had committed his 5th murder and was now somewhere in the Miami area. His ability to kill and then disappear only to pop up somewhere else and kill again was causing a great deal of panic. Despite an extensive manhunt, Andrew was nowhere to be found. On July 23rd, a property caretaker named Fernando Carrera went to check on a houseboat for a client when he noticed the lock on the door was broken. Fernando pulled a gun from his waistband and entered the house to investigate, and that's when he heard a gunshot ring out from the 2nd floor. After officers arrived, there were some reports that the houseboat owner was connected to Gianni Versace, so the police believed that Andrew was inside. Then they spent hours surrounding the house, cutting off power, trying to open communications, and planning a tactical entry, which was all unnecessary. Andrew Cunanan had shot himself in the head and was dead. His hands were swabbed for gunshot residue, which came back positive, ensuring that he had taken his own life and wasn't murdered. The amount of bullets missing from the gun's magazine was the exact same amount used during his killing spree. There would be no answers as to why Andrew had killed the people he did. There would be speculation and rumor, some more realistic than others, but nothing could be confirmed. Obviously, the murder of Bill Reese was in order to get another vehicle. The murders of Jeff Trail and David Madson could be attributed to anger over them not wanting a relationship with him, but that was still a guess. There were a lot of rumors about the murders of Lee Miglin and Gianni Versace, including secret relationships, drug use, and AIDS transmissions, but again, nobody really knows. The families of both victims claim that Andrew didn't have a relationship with either of them, and since most of Andrew's stories about where he had been and who he knew were lies, it's impossible to verify. At the end of the day, there's never a good reason to go on a cross-country killing spree, so he's a monster no matter how you frame it. Unfortunately, it took 5 innocent victims for people to find that out. If you're a fan of true crime, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode. You can also hit like or leave us a comment. You can check out our other show, Somewhere Sinister, on YouTube or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to support the show, check out our merchandise at thisismonsters.com. The link is in the description. Thanks again, and be safe.